we had a fake Jimmy Aiken in the chat. We had a Father James Martin in the chat. I was like, I don't really know if this is Brian, to be honest.
I got Tim texting me like
the audience you guys attract. That's what you get for it.
Well, that is actually an interesting point about our show. It's like, I do think we're a bit of a bridge between more normie Novus Ordo Catholics and traditional Catholics. And I think that like a lot of guys that we enjoy watching do check out our show. And it's because it's a lighthearted, humorous show and stuff. And I'll never like attack somebody that comes on and stuff. So were you finger wagging at anybody specific in your video yesterday? I did not see the video. Or were you just giving like a general...
I didn't think you finger wagged.
No, I hadn't watched anybody else's reactions when I had shot that. That was my honest, just like, so yesterday I was with my kids. We watched the announcement up until right before he blessed the crowd, and then we had to get in the car because we were going to the March for Life here in my home province. So we were out all day and then got home, and I just thought, I have to say something about this. So I quickly shot something as soon as we got home. And then I just kind of logged off for the rest of the night. So no, it wasn't directed at anybody specifically. But that said, so I went out and did a bunch of work in my yard, which is also what I was doing, which is why it took me so long to get logged onto here.
You were
but I was listening to you guys. So your episode with Tim and Rob yesterday, and I had commented on, I don't know if you saw the comment, but I said something like,
it was funny, right?
Well, I said something like, I'm one of the Copium Springs Eternal guys, or whatever Tim's phrase was. But that simultaneously, like, I was laughing out loud in my yard, like shoveling dirt while I was listening to you guys, because I disagree with a lot of what Tim was saying, but Tim's a funny guy, and I was laughing at a lot of the the points that you were saying, and I think that that's what you guys do well, is that you can be provocative, but it's generally, as far as anybody should be able to tell, in goodwill and earnest, and it's not meant to be malicious. So I think that that's a good approach.
Listen, yesterday,
I appreciate that.
Yesterday happened, and like, my heart sank. I was like, there was 3 names I was listening for, and Prevost was one of them. Like, it was one of them, because I had seen all these things leading up to it. So when they said his name out, I was like, oh no. And this sense of doom came over me. And what I was coming on the show to do was say, I don't want, because I know the way I talk can influence the people listening to me, and I don't want to doom the people listening to me. So I had normie Catholics calling me yesterday that don't watch the show, and they're like, what do you think of this Pope? And I was like, not good. And I'm like, and I thought about it last night when I went to bed. I'm like, I am setting the stage for people that don't really pay attention to church politics like I do, and giving them an immediate bad impression of a guy that they don't know anything about. And I thought that was wrong. I'm like, these are just normal Catholics that they're not like us, where we're like geeking out about like every little thing that happens. And I'm like, now these guys are going to go into this pontificate thinking, oh, this Pope is bad. He's from America. He's from Chicago. And it's like, I should not have done that. I think it is a different thing when we're talking like this amongst people who can push back a little bit and things like that. But that specific thing is what I really felt bad about.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest too, listening to your guys' episode, because I didn't know anything about him prior, like I wasn't even familiar with him. I was familiar with like a handful of American cardinals, but when they said he's American in that name, I was like, what? There's an American cardinal I don't even know about? Granted, he's kind of newish, so maybe I can be forgiven for that. But I'm also not, I don't follow, like Tim, listening to Tim, he's rattling off of all these sort of intriguing details about all of these different personalities. I'm like, I don't know about any of this stuff, right? Like, I just don't follow it that closely. So it's probably easier for me to just be like, well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But listening to your guys' episode, if I'm being honest, yesterday, by the end of it, I was like, oh, this does sound bad. Yeah. Maybe this guy is as bad as like a Supich or a Tobin or something like that. And if either of those guys had walked out onto the loggia, I would have been like, I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt here. Like, this is a disaster, right? And so if I knew enough about Prevost and I knew bad things about him, maybe it would be harder for me. But from also, having taken stock of a lot of the things that Tim was saying and you guys were saying yesterday, at the end of the day, I don't, like Tim kept on saying that, he's an Aristotelian and therefore it's all about the truth for him. But, I don't think a lot of the conclusions he was drawing are necessary conclusions from the evidence that's offered to us, right? You could say, well, he's a St. Gallen guy. Okay, but does that mean he's going to be a bad pope? Like, there are other possible interpretations here. He could just be a very diplomatic personality who is able to build bridges between the extremes on that end of the spectrum and the extremes on the other end of the spectrum. You know, there's people like Burke and Seurat who seem really pleased with this outcome, right? And maybe they're just gaslighting, or maybe they're putting up a veneer of approval, but maybe they're being sincere, and we should give them the benefit of the doubt as well. Maybe they know things about this guy that he can actually draw all of these spectrums together. And maybe, you know, if you're more cynical about it, you could say, well, that's impossible, right? Like, there's such polar opposites that can't be done. But I don't know.
What do you make of what Tim was saying about, like, Leo XIV is going to have to go back and correct these errors of Francis? Like, there are actual errors in Amoris Laetitia that need to be corrected, and like that can be a litmus test for what we can, because look, there are some, he can make these gestures, get rid of traditionis, things like that. But the real thing the trads were upset about, it wasn't the 2% of us that go to the Latin Mass. It was, I mean, it wasn't, because they tried to make it like it was just the trads that had a problem with Francis, but it wasn't. It was all faithful Catholics were like, what the hell is this guy doing? So what do we do about a guy that we like? Because I still want to give the guy room to go and some time to go and take care of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I would strongly disagree with Tim on the question of, you know, there's this crowd of traditionalists who are, what did he call us? One song, something like one issue voters or something like that. But and frankly, you know, if all I could get was the Latin Mass and given room to flourish, that would be massive in my mind, given what we've been through, for one specific reason, because in my own Latin Mass community, we are flourishing. We're breeding. Like, the average age at our Latin Mass is probably like 13 at most. There's kids everywhere. We have socials every other week, and the hall is filled with like crazy kids everywhere, running around, getting to know each other, wearing 3-piece suits and bow ties. And it's like, that's dangerous to the progressives and to the modernists, because that's culture, and culture won't just raise a generation of people committed to the faith creedally, but culturally they'll have a heart for the faith as well. And if you allow the Latin Mass to proliferate and to distribute itself the way it was under Summorum Pontificum, you're going to raise a generation of trads. Like,
I wanted to bring this up with Tim.
And culturally sound.
I wanted to bring this up with Tim. I forgot to, but he does understand that because of skateboarding. It's like, like skateboarding was a culture, and I could still see that culture is in him, you know? So to me,
that was my culture too. Growing up, I was a sponsored skateboarder, actually, when I was like 17 years old. So, so I fully get what culture, what punk rock skateboarding culture, what subculture is all about. And that's why I think I have these sensitivities to culture within the dynamics of the church.
100%. And the liturgy, to me, so this was like a change in my thought over years, where it took me like really being a Latin Mass regular attendee that you see that culture soaks into you. It's, I can't even explain it. It's just, it made me realize that like the shifts that happened in our culture, I'm not saying they're the sole cause of changing the liturgy, but they have so much to do with it, because when you're living that liturgy out, it changes the way you think, it changes the way you see things, right? So my point would have been where he's saying like the morals come first. My point would be that living that liturgy out will then lead to the morals, right? Like, so
and doctrine is there too. I've never heard a bad homily at the Latin Mass. Like, so the fraternity cares for our community, and it's like every week we're getting St. Thomas, we're getting St. Francis, we're getting the whole spectrum of church fathers who are sound, and Augustine. Every week the bulletin is going through some work of Augustine, and I'm sitting here reading it like right before Mass, and it's like, you can't be immersed in that atmosphere and not have it affect you both doctrinally, both in the mind and the heart. And I think that if you raise a generation like that, it doesn't matter how many St. Gallen mafiosos there are. They can't. That's a tidal wave coming their way, and their clock is ticking.
Yeah, so I know Tim would say, dude, I love the Latin Mass as much as you guys do, and I'm not disputing that he does. My point is that even if Leo doesn't go back and correct these errors of Francis, if he gives us the Latin Mass back, it will prepare the next generation to face that battle when we finally do get the Pope that's going to be the Pope of Restoration that will go and tackle it. Like, I think it does take a full cultural change, because you think about what happened in the 60s and with the council, and it was an entire generation was just in this free fall from the sexual revolution and all these things. And that's what led to those liturgical changes. And then those liturgical changes were the precursor to them messing with the moral foundation. It's like you change the liturgy first, and then you mess with the liturgy, and then you mess with the morality. And that's what they did in England. Like, if you go back and read Eamon Duffy's book, it's like the first thing they did was change the liturgy, and then they start messing with the doctrine and the dogma, because the liturgy is absolutely foundational to this stuff. So I think I'm going to be happy if we get those bones thrown to us. I just am. I know it's not the penultimate standard that we're looking for, but I'm going to be happy with them.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be devastating if they actually did succeed in implementing what it seemed like people like Roche and Francis wanted in the complete suppression and dissolution of the Latin Mass. Because communities like mine, like my family, would have to go back to the Novus Ordo. And what would we find at the Novus Ordo? My children would grow tired of a banal beige faith that does nothing for them, and for which there would be no peer group for them to reinforce their faith, right? Like the community of people there are mostly public school kids wearing booty shorts at Mass, right? Exactly. My kids wearing dresses who want to hear chant, who want to read poetry together and have poetry recitals. Like, they're not going to find their people there, and they're going to get lonely and isolated and exhausted by it all. But the fact that we are able to go to Latin Mass is strengthening that generation, who's going to have to fight tough fights, but they're going to be way stronger than my generation, and even Nick's generation. Like, so you're Gen Z, right, Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, even some of the, I mean, I'm impressed by a lot of what I'm seeing with people like Nick and his generation. Like they have certain strengths that, and aptitudes of the mind and learning that, like, I've had to start reading some of this stuff by the time I was like 20, and already kind of a bit of a lost cause because of such a poor upbringing and bad education. And I think that that's what's going to save the church, is just this future generation that has the opportunity to band together and to get the right formation culturally and creedally.
Well, so all right, so somebody said we're like it's Stockholm syndrome. We're like abuse victims, just happy if the beatings start, right? We sound like survivors of abuse group, just grateful if the beatings stop. Yes, because where else do we go? So like any improvement, we are like, the past 12 years were brutal. I don't care what anybody says. Like, it's just, it was vicious to have constant airplane interviews where he called rigid and backwardness and all these things. So yes, I think those gestures of him stopping that are going to that. And then if we do get the Latin Mass, like Tim is texting me like crazy right now because he's infuriated by this conversation. We'll have to get him back on another time, but we can't do it now.
Bring him back on. Bring him back on.
You want to come back on?
Sure.
Come back on.
Sure.
You get the link. Pop in. We're better off hashing these things out together. Absolutely. Like, I really do think when disagreements come up, like if brothers just get on and talk together, it's the best way to do it. You have the link, Tim. Just pop in. Like, if there's anything I could do and like get people to have conversations that don't typically talk, like,
one thing I'll say about the Stockholm syndrome thing though is like, let's concede that all the way, and let's say we are as oppressed as something like people living in like a communist state, for example. Like we're 1960s Czechoslovakia, and we're surrounded by secret police and any sort of toe out of line, and that the heel is going to come down on us, right? Well, if the oppression is bad enough, what could we possibly do? And what's the reason for the oppression is that we as the mass are dangerous to those of the few in authority, right? So they have to keep us down. They have to keep our abilities and our wealth and our opportunity to collaborate and to gather and to protest and all those kinds of things. They have to prevent that. And they do that through threats and violence and fear and all of that kind of stuff, right? What if they lift the boot, though? You could look at that and say, well, you're grateful that they lifted the boot. That's just Stockholm syndrome. It's like, yeah, sure. But also now we're much more dangerous because we aren't living in constant fear, and because we can gather and we can conspire and we can work together, because we're not living under the constant threat of execution or of our neighbor being a member of the secret police or whatever. So with that boot lifted off the Latin Mass, that gives us strength and that gives us power that we didn't have otherwise. And that's better than nothing. That's better than where we were a year ago.
That's my position. So me and Tim were talking yesterday, and it's like we were pointing out, it's like, yeah, okay, so trads are going to get thrown these bones, and Tim's point is that when that happens, what they're doing is coalition building, and all they're trying to do is bring more people over to the Pope-splainer side. So it's like they give us our TLM back, and then next thing you know, they have another synod and they start pushing that boundary again that Francis was pushing that whole time. But because we got our TLM back, all of a sudden we're like, oh, don't say nothing about the Pope. I don't want to lose my Latin Mass. And I do think part of that is part of the Stockholm syndrome.
Sure. Okay. So let's say that as a tactic is effective. So for the current generation that could like be the resistance generation. So let's say that's the three of us and Tim as well. Hey, Tim. Let's say that placates us, that pacifies us, so we're no longer resistant. Frankly, I don't think that resistance from us is going to do anything other than just expose us to the boot again. I think that the coming generation, Gen Z and like my kids' generation, I think that they're the wave, and it's clergy as well. Remember, look at the change of the clergy and the direction that they're headed in, like from very, very liberal a few decades ago to very, very conservative now. And I think that trend is going to continue as this generation grows up. That's the generation that will actually be able to resist and affect change, because it's going to be a whole generation of clergy who are going to then become bishops, because there's no Gen X bishops, frankly, who are then going to just assume all of these roles within the episcopate, and one of them will become pope as well. And at that point, it's a done deal, and we don't really have to be the violent overthrow resistance or whatever we want to be at that point.
Before you guys all debate it out, I've had to use the restroom for 2 hours.
Oh, so go ahead, Nick. Go ahead. Yeah. And just come back.
I'm gonna let you three famous people hash out the conversation. I'm just a simple theology.
We need
a moderator in here. This is
we'll let Anthony do that because he's
Tim. I do need to know. Do I need a beep button for you today? Is what people are asking me.
Just before I leave. Just God bless all three of you. And Anthony, whenever the show is done, I give Brian my number. I'd love to like actually connect and do some type of like nerdy theology thing with you, if you'd be open to that, Brian. So
sure, yeah. Are you leaving for the rest of the show, Nick?
Yeah,
he's gonna let us.
Okay, I'm gonna let you three do. I honestly don't think I can contribute much to the conversation. So, but
sounds good.
Yeah, God bless you three.
All right,
God bless you. Don't leave on my account.
No, you guys are good. Go for it.
God bless you, bro.
So Tim, you texted me like a madman. I'm trying to pay attention to two things at once. So, what were you bringing up? Because I was trying to listen and you were texting at the same time.
Oh well, I mean, I was just saying. Brian, what's up, bro? How are you?
Good.
I didn't understand some of the characterizations, but I would never say that to be an Aristotelian you can divine the future or something. I simply didn't say that. And I thought Anthony would correct that. Yesterday we were just saying, look, as of right now, I heard you, which I appreciated, admit, look, I didn't follow these personalities in the College of Cardinals as closely. As of right now, it looks really bad. This guy is a close collaborator of Francis Mariadaga, whatever his name is, and Cardinal Supage, and things are looking bad, And so what I was connecting was the idea that we have to go where as close as we can approximate the evidence to truth, like cause to effect. That's all I was saying. I wasn't saying that it gives me an ability to divine the truth.
No, and I think that it seems to me that a lot of the evidence is speculative, though, so that the truth or some of the conclusions that are being drawn, there could be alternative explanations to a lot of the things, and we could go through specifics of that. But just as I was listening to the episode yesterday, that's where I felt I was like, I mean, that makes sense. That's a logical conclusion, but I think that there are others as well. And from that range, if for those of us that want to be copers or copiums or whatever, that's an attractive option.
Sure, but we can always apply relative quantities to, okay, close, Mariadaga or Supich, Francis. His brother says he's going to be Francis too. It sounded, and Twitter's a horrible medium for carrying on convos. It should be more like this.
For sure.
It sounded like you were saying that it's like, well, 50-50, maybe he is all of those things, and maybe somehow coincidentally it doesn't. I was just saying, yeah, 99%, this sounds like a Francis man. That's not speculative beyond dealing with the relative ratios of probability. It's just he's definitely been here and here in the past. I'm hoping for the best, but when people groaned, like even Anthony Stein, who, this is not a temperament thing. He's probably phlegmatic or something. And he said just what he said, when a couple of these things happened this morning. The new Pope, Leo XIV, doesn't want to get rid of Tucho Fernandez originally. It is pretty quick, but I thought the same thing. And and people were jumping on his case. And he's very phlegmatic. And Anthony, again, he's got a doctorate. I'm working on a doctorate. We're guys that have studied this stuff for a decade. And so it has the look of, if we're talking about charity, an uncharitable mob leaping on one or two or three guys who do know this stuff very well, just because they don't like the semi-inevitable prescription. It's not inevitable, right? It could be some other explanation, but it's very improbable that this guy has not, at least to this point, been a Francis man. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, and it depends what we mean by a Francis man too, because he could be trying to position himself as everybody's man, which isn't ideal because you can't do that, but it's better than being fully committed to one faction and hostile to the other. And if we think of ourselves as the other faction, I would prefer a guy who's trying to ally himself to everybody and trying to bring everybody together and build bridges than someone who's just going to bring the boot down. And I think that that's a possible explanation. I mean, he could just be one of those very diplomatic guys who behind closed doors, as someone who what was he, with the dicastery for bishops or something like that, who would have been meeting with all these various bishops one-on-one, presumably, or just was a close contact to them. He could have just been one of those guys who is very affable in those scenarios, at which point they think, oh yeah, he's one of my guys.
Except
therefore,
that he acts like the holiest American bid. That doesn't have a good
he
look.
could have been doing that at Francis's behest, first off, and second off, like Tim, we saw this with a lot of the bishops and this just reeks to me of just weak men that are going with mimetic desire as well, where under Benedict they were saying one thing, and then Francis came and they were just like Dolan even did a little bit of that, where it was like, well, Francis said he wants the culture wars to end, where Dolan before, when he was under Benedict, he was like a pro-life leader in the church. We thought he was the greatest bishop ever. So there is even like the Supich connections we were making. I saw somebody pointed out today, they were like, there's no actual connection between him and Supich. Supich, like he was out of the diocese before Supich. He wasn't really his boss and stuff. So like, I understand, like we could have been making more connections that were actually there, but
the connection is strong. They weren't there in the same time. They don't share a diocese. That doesn't work. But they're strong friends. And Supich, it is now known, was strongly in his camp. But no, and by the way the Curio works is Francis didn't know who Strickland is. Francis didn't have it out. Francis doesn't know who most of the bishops are. The dicastery for bishops as prefect, he knows all of the big bishops, particularly the problem ones. It's more like he advised Francis to get rid of Strickland. That's the way it typically works. That's how the curia works. That's how the dicasteries work. But the point is really that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
I'm just saying, you guys already heard my litmus test, and I think it's a rational one. And that was the only other thing I was texting you about, Anthony, was I think it's a quite defensible litmus test because we cannot permit Arianism. That's why we have ecumenical councils. It wasn't even a guarantee in the Roman Catholic Church there was going to be an ecumenical council. We started having them because of Arianism, and then the next 6 councils are shoot-offs of Arianism, right? So we only have councils because of doctrinal error, because of heterodoxy. Yeah. It is intolerable. I love the Latin Mass too, and everyone was making me like I didn't get how potent a bromide it is. It is culturally precisely as potent as you, Brian, were saying, and Anthony, you were saying. Like, it's just mischaracterizing me. But it's not the same discipline, beautiful culture building discipline in all the ways, Brian, you were adducing, perfectly, exactly well expressed. Is not even in. It's not the same thing as doctrine. Doctrine. No. Heterodoxy explodes the church, and we have that tumor right now, and it can't go longer, or we don't have the one true faith. It's that important. So that's why it's the litmus test.
So if we take something like Amoris Laetitia, though, I mean, it's symptomatic to me of everything that has gone on in the church for, like, let's say, the past 60 years, and not everything, but a lot of the milestone incidents that provoked confusion, let's say, where it wasn't that, you know, a pope or anybody representing the magisterium came out and said something that was like definitively heretical. It was, here's kind of an open door interpretation to something, and maybe a bishops' conference will come along, like say in Argentina, and come up with an interpretation that is heretical or heterodox, and I can just give them a wink and a thumbs up, which isn't a magisterial statement of any kind. So I avoid compromising that, but then I am still pursuing the agenda that I want to see enacted within the church. I think that kind of thing goes on a lot in the church, and I think the remedy for that kind of thing, like ideally, you and I would probably say the remedy to that is like a Pius the 13th who will come in and like just bring the hammer down and say no more of this nonsense. But I think that would just cause a war within the church.
No, I agree with that. If I agree with you non-facetiously 100%, if that were what happened, Brian. And I do also agree with your characterization that that's what had been going on since the close of the Second Vatican Council. That kind of situation you described. That's not what happened, though. That was most of what happened until September of 2016. What happened was the Argentine bishops wrote their own dubia while Burke et al. Were still awaiting the answers and dying in waiting for the answer to their dubia. We're still waiting for it. They wrote their dubia, and it was responded to the same day. They said, we're going to give active adulterers communion, which can't happen. Is this what you want? And Francis not only responded unambiguously, Francis said, that is correct. Also said that is the only correct interpretation, but wait, there's more. The same day he wrote that Resposta, he placed it into the deposit of the closest thing to a living deposit of faith, the Acta Apostolica Sedis. You missed that part, and that makes all the difference. That is truly unique. It is lying in our deposit of faith. We are lying when we tell Protestants and Orthodox that we've never had a contradiction in. We have that until another pope gets rid of it. Now, it doesn't explode the church until popes habitually teach error. So if the next guy after Francis, Leo XIV, says wrong, then we're still good. If the next guy after Francis makes it a habit, we're in real trouble. This is not just the beautiful culture of the Latin Mass versus the ugly Novus Ordo.
So I think that's a false dichotomy you're putting up, though, because you're saying it's like, well, Arianism is okay, or communion for divorce and remarried is okay as long as we get the TLM. And that's not what I was saying either. I was saying if we did get the Latin Mass, not that that's okay, it's that you're forming the next generation for the actual fight when it comes up again. We don't have a culture that is, dude, when you poll Catholics and you're talking about mass going Catholics about the divorce and remarriage thing, it's like 80%. You put your own poll out. You remember how skewed your poll was and you have a freaking trad audience following you, how skewed the poll was for divorced and remarried to receive communion in that one thing. It was like, that was one of the highest ones that went. So if you don't have a culture that's willing to stand up and go, because we all know people that are divorced and remarried, like it's a plague on our culture. So if you allow the TLM, what you're doing is you're forming that next culture to put pressure on their hierarchy to then go ahead with this, because the hierarchy, they like to be liked, so I mean,
we're not like, it's not a vox populi. We already have it. I mean, for all of these other issues on my poll, you're right, that one was surprising, particularly for my audience, Anthony, but for all these issues, they were mostly 85-15 or 90-10. You saw that. That doesn't matter. They've been 85-15 or 90-10 for at least the last 10 years. We do not have a democracy. What's dangerous about a monarchy, which is what we function under, it's the best theoretical form of government, but the worst when it goes bad, according to Thomas and Aristotle, right? What's dangerous about it is if they harden their hearts like Pharaoh, and they say, we're not going to listen on this, the way they haven't been for over 10 years, 15 years, then it doesn't matter how many good Latin Mass Catholics you get. The Latin Mass Catholics have always been the faithful ones. They've always had children of 10 to 15, big families. They'll still.
But now there's like 10 times as many of us, though.
I know, but the point is, there's a lot of us as it is. Even if there's 10 times as many, or whatever, 1%, even if it goes to 10%, that doesn't change Denzinger and the way that the magisterium and holy tradition works is, if in that time habitual error is taught, then we have a real problem. And it's not, they're not comparable things. You're never going to get to doctrinal contradiction, not doctrinal tension like some of the Vatican II documents, doctrinal outright heretical contradiction. Mueller said it was practically formal heresy. You're not going to get to that just by having more grassroots good Catholics. And I also want to make everyone clear that the only place my family receives the sacraments is in the Latin Mass. I
wasn't accusing you of not doing that. I was pointing out, like, my position on it shifted by seeing how much my life changed by going to it regularly and seeing the change in my children by going to it regularly. And I thought that would be a good approach. I'm still going to be happy with that. I know what you're saying. Like, it's the two can't even be compared when you're talking about heresy.
My life is much better when I go to the Latin Masses too. Brian's and his families too, and my families and Brian's families too. Everyone knows this, but that doesn't change if you have. I don't know how else to express it. It's I think you've expressed it clearly. We have heresy in the AAS, man. That's not. That can't be brooked. That can't be passively tolerated. It's the worst. We have the worst crisis ever. Arianism wasn't even in the AAS. You just had bishops teaching it. This is the Pope. Put it into the deposit of faith. Like, wake up. It's a huge deal. I'm going to go debate Jay Dyer and some Freemasonic Protestant on Tim Pool's show on June 13th. And they can literally just be like, dude, Pope Francis, and you have Pope splainers out there. He literally put a heresy into the AAS. I'm like, well, it's not habitual yet. What if by June 13th, this guy doubles down on that? It becomes habitual teaching. Someone answer me that. I'll wait. It's really important.
What is the heresy, though, Tim? Like, I understand that what it communicates is heretical, but like, what is the actual heresy on, like, the doctrinal heresy on the books? Because and again, I don't know the whole ins and outs of everything that's happened since Amors Laetitia and the response to the Dubium, but to me, it suggests that all that he's given so far is instruction on discipline rather than actual doctrine.
No, because Anthony was the one saying the Latin Mass is doctrine, not discipline. No, this is actually that Matthew chapter 5, our Lord is wrong. That Luke chapter, 18 verse 16 or 16 verse 18, I forget, is wrong. He's saying Jesus is wrong. Pope Francis it stands for you could do it in modal logic. I was a logic professor. You could say that this stands for the proposition that if Francis right, Jesus wrong. But when Jesus says, if you divorce your wife and marry another, it's adultery. Francis is either saying that it's not adultery or that adultery is not a mortal sin. Both of those are, this is why Mueller said it. Mueller's a cautious guy, our outgoing CDF. He's saying, that A equals not A on a very, very, very basic scriptural dogma.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, Anthony. But to me, I that's what it communicates again, because discipline can communicate, it can instruct, right? Like if you allow divorced and remarried people to receive communion, you're saying that you're not in mortal sin, right? That could just be an abuse of the disciplines without necessarily saying that, right? Like I get that that's what maybe Francis would have wanted if that's what he was communicating, but the claim that divorced and remarried people aren't committing adultery, that isn't explicitly communicated on the books.
What you're describing, Brian, is more like how the German synodal way operates. Before Francis did fiducia, they just opened up 800 churches, and this was going to be Francis's number 2 to replace Cardinal Ladaria Ferrer, the CDF. Yeah. He burned through CDFs. Before he gave us Tucho, he tried twice to give us Heiner Wilmer, who was the German synodal ways leader, and Heiner was just opening up 800 churches per weekend and saying, let's bless gay couples, even though Ladaria Ferrer had said this is not allowed. That's the situation, the kind of praxeological situation you just described, Brian, to a T.
Right.
No, but this is not that though. For it to be heterodoxy or actual heresy, he doesn't have, because no heretic would ever say that, like murder is good or whatever, or worshiping multiple gods is good. That's not how heretics work. Propositionally, by Francis putting his Resposta into the AAS, it is real heresy. Like, double check me, Google it, do your own work. Don't take it from me. But I'm just saying we have real heresy in the AAS right now. That's just, it's not the same thing. It's just turning a blind eye and allowing it. It is the biggest problem from his pontificate. And I've done shows on like the 100 huge problems, but there are none against which this doesn't pale in comparison. This is head and shoulders above the rest because it explodes the church and our claims about the infallibility of tradition.
Right. But doesn't it just, isn't there an interpretation of this where you could say that the instruction goes so far as saying that people who are in abnormal or irregular marriage states, or the situation is so complex or unclear that there might be scenarios in which they could receive communion, and maybe that even means like they have to go to confession right before, receive communion, and then go back. And I know that's not tenable, obviously, because they have to have.
You can't receive absolutely.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, obviously. But like, what if they're trying to think of scenarios that are known only to God or some BS like that, where they say, well, maybe in those scenarios, and they're just trying to open up the window through ambiguity, but they still haven't said that they're not adulterers or that Jesus was wrong. Like, nothing like that exists on the books as far as I know. He
hasn't said, quote unquote, Jesus is wrong, Brian. Right. But I don't know how much you know about the history of this issue. Maybe a lot, maybe you haven't looked at it, but Familiaris Consortio by JP2 was a breakthrough on this in whenever he published it. Was that the 80s? JP2.
And what's the AAS?
What?
Do you know what the actual AAS stands for? What is
Acta Apostolica Sedis? Okay. Acta Apostolicae Sedis. AAS is just the closest thing we have to an actual depositum fide that's sort of encoded. But no, Familiaris Consortio, Brian, is the compromise. It's the final word on whether or not remarried divorcees can receive communion. Cardinal Casper, same Sankt Gallen Mafia guy, at a synod in 1982 or 1983, this is how long these guys are at work, tried the Orthodox option, which he eventually got through with Francis, in 1982 or 1983. And JP2, thank goodness, said, nope, we're not doing that. And then he published Familiaris Consortio. And he said, here's the most I can do for you. And it's actually a good compromise. It's a good compromise. JP2 said, I already gamed it out for all of the guys out there that are going to use test cases that you can't even fathom up, that Francis did use in chapter 8 of Amoris. He got it from Cardinal Casper. What if we have remarried divorcees that have new kids together, and it would require splitting them up previous to Familiaris Consortio? Well, JP2 said, solve the problem for you. You can continue to live together, even if it's an adulterous second union, as long as in the foro interno, the internal forum, you get together with your priest or bishop and you promise to live continentally as husband and wife, and you get different bedrooms as brother and sister. Sorry. Familiaris Consortio destroyed any reasonable doubt that could exist afterward. It's just, that's fine. If you have a kid from the adulterous second union, live as brother and sister. I think it's Familiaris Consortio 84, if I'm not misremembering. It was revolutionary. It was a big deal. It was the answer that JP2 gave to Casper in the 80s. So there's just, when you war game stuff out the way Gallen does, or I guess the good guys do countervailingly, there's no extra hypotheticals which would even allow any daylight. It's just either heresy or not. And again, if Francis had just given that response to the Buenos Aires guys and said, okay, you have the best or only interpretation, and he didn't put it into the AAS, that would still be close. But the same day, placing the document into our depositum fide has to be undone. And I don't know, I'm repeating.
So, wait, Tim, so a lot of people are asking this, like, what constitutes habitually taught, right? So if Leo goes along with this and it's habitually taught, does this invalidate the church's infallibility for you? If so, then what?
There's no magic number, and so it's kind of like Dwight Schrute counting, to stall for time. Like, is it at 1? How about 2? How about 3? It's going from 1 to 2 popes teaching error, which we've really never had since the errors in the depositum, is a really scary step. And you could argue it's habitual then. I don't have the magic number. I don't think Denzinger would have the magic number, but 2 to 3. 3 to 4, it's becoming a vertical asymptote at that point. You know what I mean? And I'm just saying, to take it back to, this is all very outdated, 9 years old kind of analysis from 2016. Take it back to yesterday. I'm forgetting his name, Prevost, becoming Leo XIV. When we're just trying to use basic tests for proving or disproving. I mean, not proving or disproving, because everything you said, Brian and Anthony, is right. We're not going to know today. But basic tells for whether or not this is a man after Jesus's or Peter's own heart. And I said, look, the best one is this litmus test, and it shouldn't take 2 or 3 years. This is why it's the test, because of his predecessor, Francis, makes this really clear, particularly because we already know they were friends. He was friends with Supich, contrary to what people are saying. He was friends with Maradiaga, and he's related both substantively and procedurally to the litmus test, is what I'm saying.
Do you think so? I like the example that you gave about going to scenarios where you're talking to guys like Jay Dyer or Protestants, or having these kinds of debates, because this is something I've felt for the past 10 years. In any attempt to defend the faith, the Orthodox faith, right? There's all of these opportunities where people are coming in and saying, well, it sounds like you're contradicting the Pope and his openness and his pastoral approach to the LGBTQ, or whatever the issue might happen to be, right? And I have to sit there and be like, well, let me explain all the nuances here, because now we need 100 different distinctions to actually explain what's going on here. And that makes my job, A, boring, and B, extremely laborious, right? And people don't want to tune in for that. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought on this.
Yeah, it happened. I hate when it happens. I agree with all that.
When debating Protestants.
It makes it boring and hard.
Oh yeah. Right. Okay, so so do you think that there's a liability in having something formally added to the deposit of faith and then removed by a successor like that? And we saw like this is what one of my big issues with Traditionis Custodes is that it was like, now are we treating the pontificate like this Overton window that swings back and forth between the Republicans and the Democrats? Every time one gets elected, they undo what the other guy did. And it's like, we can't have that kind of thing going on in the church. There has to be continuity. Otherwise, we're going to start to really discredit the office and the authority of the Pope. And so, and how much more so if we're actually talking about things that are considered part of the ordinary magisterium, which then get removed. Like, that's way more severe than like, tinkering with the catechism like we saw in recent years. Like, that to me somewhat discredits the authority of the magisterium.
I get what you're saying, but one, I did teach church history for 9 or 10 years, and if you look at Honorius, we don't, in the Annuario, we don't even have a clear ruling on exactly how the church regards Honorius. We don't have an exact teaching, clear teaching on what all of the other popes during, now I'm losing my, Arianism, for those 300 years.
All like a tea with lemon and honey in it.
Yeah, we need tea with lemon. From like 300 to 600, what was the status of all the semi-weak popes and all that? There were some public-facing about faces. There and going back and forth, it is, what I'm saying is, it is a lot more like electoral politics than people think. I'm good friends with Michael Knowles, and he said, yeah, and I was texting him when I was on my like third show of the day, and we were texting back and forth, and I'm losing my train of thought, but I'm like, he's like, yeah, it's never, he and others were saying it's not like electoral politics at all. It's actually a lot more like electoral politics. And it is fine, and it is baked into even the early church to have some popes going back and forth. Now, that was never with outright heresy, like Honorius. It wasn't outright heresy with Honorius. With Francis, it's my brothers in Christ. It's outright heresy. And it would be, I get what you're saying, Brian, but it would be far better to undo it the one time than it absolutely doesn't violate the rule of faith on how consistent we have to be, because it won't have been habitually taught. So we can't just leave it. If I know you're not suggesting it in like a stupid, flippant way, but but that's kind of the implication, that maybe if we just leave it, no one will further enact it. That's not it. People know about Amoris Laetitia. Jay Dyer and the EOs know about it. I talk to them about it. Even smart Protestants, if you can find one, know about it. And more than that, we know about it. It's on our conscience. It is a real material heresy called out by CDF Mueller himself, and he insinuates it's material that's basically become formal. So sorry for the long name.
It's why they submitted the dubia, because they wanted clarifications on it. Like, the dubia were submitted specifically for Amoris Laetitia, which is what I'm like a little bit hopeful that meeting with Cardinal Burke and at the time Cardinal Prevost was about that, but we don't know.
That's what I said. Yeah, no, that's my real hope, and that's why it's a litmus test, Anthony. It's a litmus test because it has to be. Because I mean, but that's where I was just objecting to. I am not hopeless. I don't like my odds. Like driving up to the house, and I'm pretty sure I left the water on. I'm pretty sure I'm going to see water streaming out the front door. But I do have hope that somehow God will preserve the church. He has to, but this can't be habitually taught. And Denzinger doesn't tell us how many magic popes it's a great question, like Brian, but Denzinger doesn't clarify. None of the popes that he's aggregating or none of the councils he's aggregating clarify at what point it becomes habitual error. It's just really, it's serious as a heart attack. I love the Latin Mass too. That's all I was saying. And I'm just like, when people yesterday were, and Brian, you were doing a little bit of it, like finger wagging. I'm like, look, we do all have different temperaments. I'm not some doomer. Someone in Anthony's audience called me a doomer. I think Leo XIV, it's within the realm of possibility. It's not, doesn't violate the rule of non-contradiction. So it's possible. Could be the best pope ever. And of course, the first thing he would do would be to undo Amoris Laetitia. So I'm not a doomer. I just have this. I was a logic professor, a philosophy professor, and when I taught high school, I was a church historian. You combine those things, and what do you get? You get a guy who says the litmus test is we got to pull this out now, and we needed 267, whoever it was going to be, to pull it out now. And I'm worried that the cardinals who gave us that guy gave it to us because they want to preserve the heresy to explode the church. And they know Sarah would have taken it out first thing. Cardinal Sarah would have taken it out first thing, or Burke, you know?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be the most base pope ever. I think he's going to be an interim pope. At least it appears that way at first, and he's going to be the peacemaker to a degree. But like you're saying, if we put this litmus test on him, what is the approach you think the trads are going to take from here? And because you were like, oh, everybody's finger wagging, but I really see it as a ceasefire for now. And I don't know. I just don't know what the approach we should take going forward is, because we do owe filial, like whatever, filial charity to the Pope for the time being, I think.
But I'll address this to Brian. That's not going to sound one way. Like, and if you presume that a guy like me that just cares about church history, cares about Denzinger, cares about the law of non-contradiction, and cares about being philosophically coherent, meaning not violating the principle of non-contradiction, right. I'm going to sound different than a Holdsworth or an Abate or Taylor Marshall or Anthony Stein. And I think I'm kind of the rainbow candidate. Really, COVID's about all the friends we made along the way. I think we need all the voices. I just don't like when people start saying, Tim, you have to talk this magic way, and don't ask me how I know the meta rule, the rule of faith for how we have to tweet. I just think it's BS. We all have different voices.
That's a fair point, because we brought up for how many years we listened to, because I'm friends with people that are on like the Trent Horn side and the your side, and I've had people go, Tim Gordon is pulling people away from the church, but I've also had people saying, if it wasn't for Tim Gordon, I wouldn't be Catholic today. But people on the other side hear your tone and they think you're pulling people out of the church. But some people actually need to hear things put the way you're putting them. So I think that is a fair point.
Yeah, and if I can jump into that point as well. I mean, I have my temperament and my tone and my approach, right? Like, this is where I try to find the balance.
Plus you're Canadian, which we don't blame you for, but
yes. No, that there's a lot of truth to that, right? Like, Canadians are culturally passive aggressive, right? Like, in my own context, I'm seen as like hyper choleric and really intolerant. Like, there's people who have unfriended me and ghosted me because I can't be around that guy. He won't shut up, right? Whereas I go down like to Ohio and go on Matt Fradd's show, and Matt's like, "You're not choleric, dude. You're phlegmatic." I'm like, "No, you don't understand. It's just it's the difference between like your revolutionary spirit, which is baked in your DNA, although he's not American, obviously, but like it's the context that he's in, and our Canadian, like, we became a country by sitting down for tea with the Queen and being like, okay, can we have a country now? And she's like, sure, like that's kind of our cultural heritage. But so with all of that said, like, so a guy like Taylor Marshall or a guy like you, Tim, will take. You have a different temperament, you have a different tone, you have a different approach. And while you know that I've disagreed with you on certain things, for the most part, I think that you have an important voice in the church. And the thing that pisses me off more than anything is the people who really want to say, he's causing conflict or division in the church, whoever that he might be, whether it's you, Tim, or whether it's me, or whether it's an Austin Ivory or whoever, right? Like, yeah, we disagree, and we disagree vehemently, but we should be able to hash that out and have serious conversations about serious things, and do so to a degree that gets our hackles up in the process. That's okay. I think the complaint that people always talk about, like, all these Christians and they're infighting. That's why I'm not part of the church. That's BS. That's what it means to be part of a family. Right?
Exactly.
Families fight. It's the people who are indifferent towards each other, like divorcees who won't talk to each other. That's when you've got a problem. At least we're still talking if we're fighting, right? That's a good sign, I would say. There's a lot to fight about. Like Chesterton talks about that, right? Of all the things to fight about, the faith and religion is worth fighting about. So let's fight about it. That's great as far as I'm concerned.
Dude, if you guys ever came to a body family function, like we are freaking out, screaming at each other, and then hugging at the end of it. It's just the way it is. So I'm used to
that's great
situations where people are fighting and then they make up. And then I've seen families that are very closed off and they keep everything bottled in and they do end up divorced and crap like that. So I was very happy that you both wanted to come on, because clearly there was a little disagreement there. And
we've been on each other's shows. So I mean, I've always liked it. I mean, the last thing where I felt finger wag Brian was Trent Horner, his wife, dressed up as me and acted like some sort of skater idiot. And then I put on headgear too. And you're like, well, that's me. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't have very thin skin. Everyone probably here knows that, but we have to have one standard for everyone. Like if so-and-so is going to go on and put on headgear and make someone look like a caricaturized version of themselves, then you're going to get it back. I mean, girls don't get that by and large. Guys get that. But
I think the immediate perception was something to do with Trent's heritage. And it wasn't that. You were literally just goofing on his hair. But it was different when you did it. And I thought it was just goofy and silly. Like you did it on my show. It was like
that's why we need a masculine voice in the church, because guys goof around, girls choose to get offended. And once we reclaim that, then we'll reclaim joy, goodness, joking, things like that. But like I just the one thing, and Brian, I've always liked you, which I told you in DM, and I don't say that because I am so aggressive. I don't say that to people I don't mean it to. I've always liked you. I was just like, again, the tone policing is an element of the post-conciliar kind of girl church that is going to die out, and it couldn't die out fast enough, because I talk like a man, right? Other people talk, I talk like a whatever. I always forget the word for what you're saying my temperament is.
Choleric.
I'm also the nostalgic.
Choleric.
I'm choleric, nostalgic, whatever the fourth one is. I'm a mixture, and I'm super nice in real life.
Sanguine, probably.
Sanguine, yeah. You're choleric sanguine. You're choleric sanguine. I'm sanguine choleric. So I'm like way more on the other side. Dude. I've never seen anybody who, when they believe something, just puts their freaking foot down and they don't give a crap who's offended by what they have to say. They're just gonna say it.
Yeah, but I'm nice. And by the way, total aside, this is why we need NCAPS, Brennan and Audra Nakani's actual Catholic Thomistic personality typing system, because the 4 just isn't enough. The 4 temperaments, but that's a whole different aside. I defy anyone who's ever come up to me at Latin Mass and asked anything, and I've gotten some funny and bizarre and some onerous requests to say, oh yeah, dude, in real life, Tim's a nice guy, and everyone already knows you're a nice guy, Brian. But and you are, but the tone policing just seems like, well, it's a little bit of an implicit claim to knowing the meta rule or the rule of faith. If you know, and Anthony, this is what I was objecting to earlier today. That's all. To know exactly what people. Oh, I don't know exactly how you should talk, but I do know how you shouldn't talk. It's just not accurate. People literally criticize me most of my audience has been pre-filtered, but they'll be like, you're using too big of words. I'm like, okay, here's what you do. Email me, find out exactly to the word how many words are in your vocabulary. English has 5 times more words than the second most verbose language, or the biggest language. Find out how many words are in your vocabulary. Email it to me, and I'll only use that 21,683, those exact words, just for you and everyone else who's. There's just no one way to talk. And once this patriarchy movement that I'm kind of near the heart of takes off more and more and more, you're seeing it a lot. We're going to stop tone policing each other, because men are all different, and we all have our special auras and our special colors, and we don't have to just use the language that Anthony would have used, or Tim would have used, or Brian would have used. We're all the colors of the bow, man. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I didn't think we were going to air our dirty laundry on air, but as far as like the incident with Trent, I didn't know the other part of that story. If I didn't know that they had dressed well, I knew that she was doing parody videos all the time, but I didn't know that's what you were responding to. So mea culpa if that's the whole context that I was missing there. And obviously, Twitter isn't conducive to having the full conversation that we would need to have. So if this is an opportunity to air grievances and say apologies, then I'll gladly offer my apology for that.
Yeah,
because I do agree with you. Yeah.
Sorry if I cut you off sort of in the deep, but I thought I said that, I'm sure I was being maybe slightly an ass. So sorry if I was, but it's tough because when you are one of the first responders, the way I was and other members of my family, including my wife, were to this raging fire of feminism in the church, which is really what the actual guys who infiltrated the church said they wanted to do. Smascalasare. Francis repeated it. That's a Vatican II thing. And make just the women kind of run the church, then injustice reigns. And so you get stuff like all these shots, like before, people don't know this, before anything with the horns, Trent and Laura, I literally shot Trent an email. I still have this email in my sent box. I shot Trent an email and I was like, hey man, I just saw Laura and you do a Ask Me Anything video. This is probably 3 years ago. She seems really nice. Do you guys want to just come on and do a couples thing? Because it had already been like 2 or 3 years since I'd like obliterated him in that feminism debate. And I just wanted to extend a hand. And he was like, no, she doesn't like to go on or talk about shows she doesn't know. And I was like, okay, it's not super nice because I'm avuncular that way, even if I'm a dick in other ways. But so then all of a sudden someone sends me these videos like a year later and she's making fun of, how I dress, how I talk, making fun of a deeply, deeply hurtful family thing that still hasn't been sewn up with my younger brother. And then she goes on Matt Fred. Matt Fred pays my wife Steph a nice compliment. She's like a prophet of asking your husband. And Laura can't stand it. And she goes, she basically says Steph needs to disobey her husband. Does she stand up to her husband? I mean, that's terrible. So like you kind of traipsed it by tone policing there. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. You already apologized. We're cool. I'm always cool with Brian.
Yeah, there was an underlying issue
into that, not knowing.
Yeah, there was an underlying issue there, and there was like really, Trent, you should just have a conversation like this. It's like this is how
you won't, and that's why I invited because he was a little butthurt after the double debate on death penalty and feminism. You could see why immediately after you listen to that double debate. But I thought, okay, let it go a year or two, and then reach out. And I literally was like, "Your wife seems really nice," It was a whatever. I don't use words like cute, but it was a touching video you did together, and you and I might get along, especially in the context of the four of us with our wives. Then kind of declining on that specifically for the reason, oh, well, she doesn't know you, but then you can mock me, my brother, my wife, some of it more hurtful than other, and say my wife should challenge me. And Matt's immediately uncomfortable. He's like, whoa. So I've reached out several times, and the fact of the matter is people might not like to hear it in the audience, but like Brian Holdsworth's the nice guy in real life. I know because we do correspond some. I correspond more often with Anthony. He's a real life nice guy. You probably don't want to grant it to me, some of you in your audience, but I'm a real life nice guy. Like people meet me and they're like, thanks. Thank you for just, you are what you say you are. And, but not everyone's like that. So some people really won't talk to you behind the scenes. And, I don't need to get into all that, but you are, Brian, and I do appreciate it. And I would talk to Trent or Taylor or anybody that kind of leaves the steaming rabble of the relationship steaming. I'd always prefer to reconcile.
Can I tell you, man, like part of this whole thing with the Pope, I know it's weird, but I think so much of the tension between brothers where there is these weird things has to do with us not having a father for so long. And because like you look at the guys who used to run in the Catholic speaker circuit, and like there were people, like you would see guys that were great friends for years under Benedict. They were on the Catholic speaker circuit. And then under Francis, you just watch relationships deteriorate. And then this person saying the wrong thing about Francis, and we can't really have conversations with them publicly because we can't be seen to be endorsing their view. And you have this whole guilt by association thing start happening.
Yeah.
I think so much of what we're dealing with is we don't have a father. So when I started seeing everybody getting behind the Pope, part of me was like, oh, maybe we could have some brotherly love again, man. Like I'm all for, even if there is tension, we all just sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah, that's penetrating. That's very insightful, Anthony. I think that, you know, the dynamic of the family and the analogy of the family is really applicable, because when the father doesn't break up serious conflict, or when it escalates to the level that the father needs to get involved, then the kids will figure out how to do it themselves, and it's gonna be messy, and they're not going to do it well, right? Especially because at that point it's just become a power struggle, right? And it's not productive, and charity is certainly going to be sacrificed in the midst of it.
That's why Soloviev literally said he became Catholic, the Orthodox Russian. He said, he goes, well, this is when I realized I needed to look at Catholicism. When you don't have Papa to call brothers to the table, it will be endless squabbling. Yeah. It's exactly what you guys just described. I think it's a perfect sort of
why there's a head of the family. Absolutely.
Sociological read. It's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, this was such a freaking unique opportunity. I'm so glad you both were open to coming on and just shooting this shit with each other, man. This was very cool. I know you guys have been on each other's shows, but it was kind of like unique in that Tim was pointing out a video Brian did, and then Brian jumped on and Tim jumped on. So yeah, look, I like I said, this whole thing, when I started seeing everybody get behind the Pope, I was kind of like a little excited that like maybe things like this might start happening again. So Tim, you're 100% right on the, like, these major issues have to be addressed. I want to give this Pope a little time to address them.
Me too. I want to give him time too. That's just what I was like, don't mischaracterize me. He needs a little time. He's not going to do it the first day. Even I was thinking that to Anthony Stein. I just don't like people beating him up, tone policing him, because we all have different voices, and that is the mark of men as opposed to women. We're like, yeah, this guy uses this colorful way to say it, or maybe is quicker to say it. This guy's more reticent or quiet or doesn't use it. I was joking when I said it. It sounded sarcastic. I want all the voices. But the point is, charity always requires justice first. It's like concentric circles. So there isn't the reason that Brian and I are getting together is because, you know, Brian's a nice guy, and I'm a nice enough guy to believe in dialogue. Always, 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 men of goodwill will dialogue directly with each other. Always, 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 men of bad will avoid dialogue. Apply that wherever you want. But I will say that it's a rule of faith for human life that you get honest parties together, they'll always dialogue. But what I'm saying about what's his name, Pope Leo XIV, is that this stuff won't start happening where you get true charity without justice. So if you do just get mimetic desire and people sort of kissing up, or whatever I'm trying to use G language, people kissing up and saying the politically correct thing. Now it's trad version of political correctness. And it's not just, and it is just covering for the Pope, like Pope splainers did for like Lofton for Pope Francis. Then you're not going to see the fruit of that tree. The fruit of the tree will be poisonous. This conversation is not going well, is not accruable to Leo XIV yet. We can start saying that once he, passes the litmus test. This is because Brian's a man of good faith, and I'll stick up for myself. I'll dialogue with anyone I've ever beefed with, sincerely. Thanks though, Brian, and thanks Anthony. I just didn't want to be called, because the trads used to do it because I wasn't down with. I didn't go to an SSPX chapel. They'd always say, "Oh, Tim doesn't really love the Latin Mass." I was just getting sensitive when I hopped off, and you were like, "The culture's there." I drive in 45 to go to Latin Mass when I go.
I thought so. I didn't know. I don't know. I know you love the Latin Mass. I don't know how often you attend it and stuff. So I was trying to relate it to like skateboard culture for you, because I see the residuals of that are still in your life. Like, that's because in your youth it kind of formed you, and so it's like I don't want to even drag that whole thing up again. I wasn't trying to mischaracterize you or say anything about
No,
any
I
of
know.
that. I was
I know
just
you weren't
trying to
trying
make a point. Yeah, I was trying to make a point about culture. That's all.
Yeah, no, just for full clarity's sakes, my family, we receive the sacraments only when we go to New Orleans. We're going to double confirmation in New Orleans at the TLM. Then we do receive confession at the Boomer Nova
I'll do the same
Parish
thing.
90 seconds away. And sometimes we go to mass there, but we don't typically receive the Eucharist.
Yeah.
All that. I'm just saying I'm in that club. I am a TLM supremacist, and I love it. And I'm not making fun of trads for loving it. I'm with them. I'm just saying I get sick of the one note song where they think if we all go to the TLM, then we can abide Arianism or Nestorianism or whatever this heresy at some point, God willing, in the future, will be the condemned name of Francis's heresy. If Leo XIV is who we're hoping he is, then he will condemn this heresy, and we'll be shut of it.
Any closing thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, I'd say the thing for me is we agree that there are cancers or there are diseases that need diagnosis, and I think we agree on the diagnosis, but the solution is where I think a lot of us are finding some disagreement. And in my mind, I'm trying to think of like the sort of the long game opportunity that exists here, because I don't see a lot of short game opportunity. I don't see how we can stage a protest in front of St. Peter's or something like that, where they're going to be like, oh, okay, let's revise this. Like, I just don't see us. I don't think we have much power. I think that the power has to actually rise to the rank of the episcopate, and only when that happens are we going to see some actual reforms here, because I don't think this generation is going to do it. As good as some of the best candidates might be, and God willing, Pope Leo XIV is one of those candidates. But if he's not, I don't see the reforms happening. But I do see the reforms happening if we can cultivate a generation who will assume those roles. And one of the best ways I think we can actually have that generation be solid is if they can gather in community. And the only way that they can do that is if there's Latin Mass communities for them to gather in. Because, like, just thinking of my own kids, if we get split up and dispersed to Novus Ordos, the culture is going to swallow up like 75% of those kids. And there's probably a good number of vocations, religious vocations or clerical vocations in those numbers that wouldn't exist otherwise. In my archdiocese, last year, or maybe it was the year before, there was 4 vocations that joined the seminary. 3 of them came from our Latin Mass chaplaincy. Those are people, and again, like, there's a whole missing generation of people who will be candidates for bishops, and it's the Gen X in my archdiocese, which means that millennials are going to assume the roles of becoming bishops right away here, and they're all super conservative. And if we can continue that trend, and not just continue it, but grow that generation, then I think that's the solution in my mind. And so I think that it's a dangerous oversight for them to allow the Latin Mass to continue the way it is.
100%. It is beautifully expressed by you. My whole concern is just there's what does Thomas say? The relation of the finite to the infinite is infinite, right? It's like a 0 over 10 as opposed to 1 over 10 or something. You never get to the doctrine discipline gap by just culture in a monarchy. And so I just everything as beautifully as you expressed it, double it for me as well about what's amazing and sublime about the TLM that seems culturally to lack with the Novus Ordo, though it's valid, whatever that mystery of iniquity will turn out to be. But what you can't get, I don't think, even if there are 10 times more of us, I don't think you're going to get, if, as my theory goes, that this is a kind of top-down Gaulian mafioso culmination of the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, which is my strong belief. That's what the Gaulian group is. Yeah. Then they're never going to allow it, even if it's a public outcry, even if there's 10 times 10 as many of us, in the Latin Mass. They're just always going to ignore it quiescently. They're just going to quiescently ignore it, notwithstanding the outcry. That's the danger of monarchies, and that's what we have. So I'm just saying the mark of the monarch, irrespective of what we're doing in our beautiful families, beautiful Latin Mass culture, all of that, the mark of the good monarch here is he's going to be toiling to get rid of the heresy, which has never happened before. It's in the Acta Apostolica Sedis. If you listen to nothing else I said here today, people of avoiding Babylon, Brian Anthony, this has never happened, that it's actually kind of deliberately stuck into the deposit of faith. This is alert, and that's all I've ever been worked up about with the Francis Pontificate, that can't really easily be undone just by beautiful culture.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and again, the thing I would say is that hopefully someone from the ensuing generation will be in a position where they can undo it. I just don't think the current generation is going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and let's honestly hope that Burke is still, like, Tim, you got something to him once before, so let's see if we can get at least something to him again to maybe hope for something, because I think you are right about that clear. Well, like, let's just but like I said, we all should just give the Pope, I mean, let's give him a little time here. So
maybe
this
this
was
was an April 30 meeting was. I didn't know that until I think this morning, that he had been at the secret meeting. I mean, that's my one. I have hope. I have hope because of that, but I hadn't seen it as of most of last night until maybe very early this morning. So I don't characterize me as not having hope. I think that April 30th entering to the top secret summit at Burke's apartment literally could be them having the conversation, some iteration of the conversation that we just had.
Yeah. Yeah. Tim, you did a record 90 hours of streaming this week, man.
I was seeing through space and time yesterday. It was like 5 hours, because I went on my friend, quite frankly, show after yours. So it was wild. It was a wild day. And man, what if it had been Cardinal Robert Sarah? That would have been better. But God,
we still got a little hopium left in this one. But yeah,
no, I know.
I'm saying I had hopium for not really Sarah. I was hoping for a pizza baller, and Dolan. I was pro Dolan, man. You guys don't know what we missed out on. But
well,
all right, we're gonna
count, bro. I saw how much. Yeah, I mean, I get the irony, and I saw that article this morning. I thought maybe you disseminated it, saying it was saved the universe.
Think it's hilarious to push the jolly fat Irishman from New York as the Pope. I'm not being serious for those of you on Twitter, but all right, we're gonna wrap this up. Both of you guys, man, thank you both so much. We did 3 hours of streaming tonight, so yeah, man. If something else comes up,
Steph wanted to say one thing.
I just wanted to say a quick apology to Brian myself. I allow my trenchant mouth to get me in trouble when I think people are going after Tim, and I think I overreacted on that. So I also intend an apology your way, Mr. Holdsworth.
Well, thanks. I don't know what the apology is for, because I didn't hear you say something, but I'll just I won't go looking for it.
No, it wasn't anything big. I think I just said something that we were being school marmed, but that I think that was it. That was it.
You're a maniac. All right,
you're always welcome here in the deep South, Brian.
Yeah.
They'll wonder at the Canadian ways.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have had the conversation tonight. So thanks, Anthony. That was great.
Too.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time. I'll see you, boys.
God bless you all.
Okay.
Adios.
You too.
Peace.